The sun in the Serengeti was brutal. By midday, it felt like the earth itself was breathing heat. Juma, a veteran ranger with weathered skin and a stubborn spirit, wiped the sweat from his brow as he made his rounds across the Golden Plains. His canteen was nearly empty. His steps, usually steady, had grown uneven. He ignored the dizziness at first, pushed through the waves of nausea, focused on the distant shimmer of the next checkpoint. But the horizon began to ripple. The ground tilted under his boots, and without a sound, Juma collapsed into the dust. His radio crackled weakly at his hip, but there was no one close enough to hear. For a long while, there was only silence, the buzz of insects, the indifferent whisper of the tall grass. Then, movement. From the edge of the acacia grove, a shape emerged. Then another, and another. Lions, a small pride, cautious but curious, drawn by the strange stillness of a man sprawled in their territory. Leading them was a large lioness, muscular, scarred, but with a strange gentleness in her stride. Nia, Juma's old friend, though he didn't know she remembered. The lions approached slowly, nostrils flaring, tails swishing. They didn't attack. They didn't growl. Instead, Nia leaned down, her nose inches from Juma's hand. She sniffed once, twice. Then she did something that would stun anyone who saw it. She gently nudged him with her forehead, as if trying to wake him. When he didn't stir, Nia let out a soft, rumbling chuff. A call, a signal. The pride began to move around Juma, forming a loose, living circle, guarding him, protecting their fallen friend. The sun continued its relentless climb, but Juma was no longer alone. The Serengeti sun pressed harder against the earth, turning the grass brittle and the air heavy. Juma lay unmoving, breaths shallow, skin burning. But the lions stayed. Nia stood protectively over him, her shadow falling across his body. The other lions followed her lead, circling tighter, shielding him from the worst of the heat. Every so often, Nia would nudge him gently. A soft push of her head against his shoulder, an ancient instinct whispering, "Wake up, stay with us." When flies began to swarm, two young lionesses batted them away with lazy flicks of their paws. One male, still adolescent, crouched nearby, ears swiveling, standing guard against any approaching scavengers. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't hunger. It was something deeper. Recognition. Memory. Years ago, when Nia was barely more than a cub, it had been Juma who found her snared in a poacher's trap. It had been Juma who stayed up nights by her recovery pen. Juma who whispered words of comfort she couldn't understand but somehow felt. And now, nature had found its own way of remembering. Hours passed. Juma stirred once, mumbling incoherent words, but fell back into unconsciousness. Nia stayed by his side, her golden eyes never wavering. Finally, from far across the plains, the low rumble of a patrol truck echoed on the wind. Nia's ears twitched. She looked toward the sound, and with one final deliberate nudge against Juma's chest, as if passing him back into the hands of his own kind, Nia rose and gave a soft chuff. One by one, the lions melted back into the grass. By the time the rangers arrived, finding Juma's body oddly untouched and shielded from the sun, there was no trace of what had happened, only paw prints, and something else left behind in the dust, a promise. The beeping of a heart monitor pulled Juma from the dark. He blinked slowly, the harsh white ceiling of the ranger outpost's medical bay coming into view. Bandages wrapped his arms. A saline drip fed into his vein. At first, he remembered nothing, only heat, then darkness, and then soft chuffs, warm fur brushing against his hand, the weight of something ancient and alive standing guard over him. A nurse noticed his stirring and rushed to call the others. Minutes later, Ranger Chief Kato appeared, relief etched into every line of his weathered face. "Juma," Kato said, voice thick with emotion, "you scared the hell out of us." Juma tried to speak, but his throat was sandpaper. He managed a rasp. "What happened?" Kato chuckled dryly. "You collapsed. Heat stroke. Severe dehydration. We almost lost you." Juma frowned, struggling to piece together the dreamlike images swirling in his mind. "I wasn't alone," he croaked. Kato's expression shifted. "We know," he said quietly. He stepped aside, revealing Juma's uniform, laid neatly on a chair, covered in a fine layer of dust and paw prints, clear as day, small ones, large ones, imprinted like signatures on sacred paper. Juma's breath hitched. "It wasn't a dream," he whispered. Kato nodded. Locals said they saw lions moving strangely through the tall grass, like they were hurting something, keeping vultures away. He placed a hand on Juma's shoulder. "Looks like you've got some friends out there, old man." Juma closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. Because deep down he realized this wasn't just survival. This was gratitude, wild, wordless, undeniable. 2 weeks later, with the sun gentler and the winds cooler, Juma stood once again on the edge of the Serengeti. He moved slower now, leaning slightly on a wooden staff the medics had fashioned for him. But his spirit was lighter than it had been in years. He wore simple khakis and his battered ranger hat. No rifle, no radio, no heavy boots to announce his presence. Just Juma, and the earth he owed his life to. He walked carefully toward the acacia grove, the last place he remembered before collapsing. The grass whispered against his legs. Birds flitted overhead. He reached a slight rise overlooking the wide, sun-drenched plain. And there, like living statues, they waited. The pride. Nia sat at the front, her body poised but relaxed, golden eyes fixed calmly on him. The others flanked her sides. Young males, playful cubs, dignified lionesses. Silent, breathing, alive. For a long moment, no one moved. Juma took a slow breath, removed his hat, and bowed his head. It was not a bow of dominance or submission. It was respect, gratitude. When he raised his eyes again, he found Nia had closed the distance by several paces. Not aggressively, not hesitantly, just there. Juma crouched carefully, resting on one knee in the tall grass. Nia tilted her head, studying him. Then, softly, almost imperceptibly, she let out a low, rolling chuff, a greeting, a memory. Juma smiled. "You remembered," he whispered. And in that endless golden afternoon, man and beast, rescuer and rescued, stood together under the same sky, equals. After that day, something unspoken passed between Juma and the pride. He didn't try to tame them. They didn't try to follow him. Their bond existed somewhere in the invisible space, between respect and trust. Sometimes, during his patrols, Juma would spot Nia's pride lounging in the shade of a baobab tree. Other times, he would catch glimpses of them at the watering holes, cubs splashing clumsily while Nia watched with patient eyes. And always, if Juma paused long enough, he'd find Nia lifting her head to meet his gaze across the distance. No fear, no expectation, just a quiet acknowledgement. We remember. The other rangers started to notice too. Whenever Juma patrolled an area known for lions, reports of aggression dipped to almost zero. Other prides remained cautious, defensive. But Nia's pride? They made way for him, almost as if escorting him through their world like an old friend returning home. Word spread through the villages. Stories grew. Some said Juma spoke the language of lions. Some whispered he was protected by ancient spirits. But Juma knew better. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a miracle. It was kindness, returned. It was a debt, repaid not with gold or glory, but with loyalty. A loyalty wild enough to cross the divide between species, strong enough to outlast fear. And as the seasons changed, as cubs grew into hunters, and old lions gave way to new rulers, one thing remained constant. Whenever Juma crossed their territory, Nia would find him, and together, for a few brief moments under the Serengeti sky, they would remember who they had been to each other. Years passed. Juma's hair turned silver at the temples. His gait slowed, his patrols grew shorter. But his heart, that stubborn beating heart, remained wide open. He still carried the old wooden staff, smoothed by years of sun and sweat. And every few weeks, he made his way back to the acacia grove. Not to work, not to control, but to remember. One afternoon, under a heavy honey-colored sky, Juma climbed the familiar rise. He scanned the plains. At first, nothing. Just the endless roll of grass, the shimmer of heat. But then, movement. A lioness. Younger, smaller. Not Nia. But beside her, in the shadow of the trees, stood an older lioness. Her mane ragged with age, but her posture still proud. Nia. Their eyes met across the field. Juma smiled, the kind of smile that carries a lifetime inside it. He removed his hat, as he always did, bowed his head, and across the plains, Nia let out a low, familiar chuff. Behind her, younger lions, her daughters, her sons, watched quietly. The old ranger and the old lioness, two survivors, two stories stitched together without a single spoken word. Juma sat down in the tall grass, feeling the earth breathe beneath him. The sun dipped low, draping everything in gold. And in that fading light, Juma knew something deep and certain. Kindness never truly disappears. It circles. It grows. It waits for its moment to return, sometimes in paws, sometimes in hands, always in the wild heart of memory.
If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Subscribe for more inspiring stories.